Good afternoon. Today is day 4 of the Oceans Conference, and it is World Oceans Day. As you know, at this moment, while we are speaking, still going on in the General Assembly, the celebration of World Ocean Day. The theme for this year is Our Oceans, Our Future. This morning, the Secretary General issued a message in which he calls upon a collective resolve to share information and find solutions to common problems. By going forward together, we can ensure that our oceans are peaceful, safe, and bountiful, and remain healthy as our blue home. World Oceans Day was marked with a celebration that has transformed the General Assembly into an ocean, into a blue ocean. We heard from the Deputy Prime Minister of Sweden that said that people do not really know about the damage that our oceans have inferred. The President of the General Assembly said the Ocean Conference is where we truly began the process of reversing the cycle of decline into which our accumulated activities had played the ocean. Raising global awareness has been a priority for the conference also, and that is why many celebrities joined us during the entire week and have engaged themselves to promote oceans challenges and opportunities. During the conference, the UN Twitter account reached 9 million. And tonight, the Empire State Building will be lit up blue to mark World Oceans Day. Two very interesting and dynamic dialogues were held yesterday. To discuss the outcomes of yesterday's sessions on sustainable fishing, we have with us today Anthony Long of the Pew Charitable Trust, who moderated the session on sustainable fishing, and Milton Haughton of Caribbean Regional Fisheries Mechanism, that also participated in the dialogue, that was co-chaired by Senegal and Canada. Dame Meg Taylor, Secretary General of the Pacific Island Forum Secretariat, moderated the dialogue on increasing economic benefits to small island developing states and least developed countries. The dialogue was co-chaired by Estonia and Grenada and targeted on providing access for small-scale artisanal fishers to marine resources and markets. Because of the World Oceans Day ceremony today, there was no partnership dialogue this morning. The dialogues will resume this afternoon with a discussion co-chaired by Iceland and Peru on increasing scientific knowledge and developing research capacity and transfer of marine technology. The conference will wrap up tomorrow afternoon with expected adoption of the call for action. We will have the co-presidents, Prime Minister of Fiji and the Deputy Prime Minister of Sweden, as well as the Conference Secretary General and the Secretary General Wu and the President of the General Assembly tomorrow here in our last press briefing of the week at 12:30. We are proud to say that we have reached the 1,000 voluntary commitment target or milestone that will help restore the health of the ocean. Number 1,000 was a program by UNDP Global Environment Facility to improve locally managed fisheries in the Marshall Islands. New Zealand leads in the number of government-registered voluntary commitments with 21, followed by Australia with 20, Montenegro and Singapore each have 17. These numbers are as of last evening and will be updated today and until the closing of the conference tomorrow afternoon. This voluntary commitment from governments, from private sector, from NGOs, large and small, are an important indication of the willingness of governments, communities, businesses, and civil society to take action for the ocean. Just for your information, this evening at 7 p.m. there will be a showing of the film Chasing Coral in the Trusteeship Council. You are all welcome. The SDG Media Zone continues today. It is the last day in the UN Correspondence Room, one floor up from where we are. And today, in half an hour, will feature Richard Branson, Deputy Prime Minister of Sweden and the President of the General Assembly. Let me now give the floor for a very short introduction of how was the dialogue yesterday to Anthony Long of the Pew Charitable Trust and to Milton Haughton of the Caribbean Regional Fisheries Mechanism. Please, if you just can tell us something about how the dialogue happened yesterday. Thank you.
So you can share the floor with Milton. The Making Fisheries Sustainable dialogue, I think, was a success. There was an awful lot of interest, led by a keen panel and the co-chairs from Senegal and Canada. We saw over 40 countries make statements from the floor. The dialogue really fixed itself looking at harmful subsidies and also how we might end illegal, unregulated and unreported fishing. It drove people to deal with those points that are written into the concept note. That is, how do we better share information? How do we better use regional tools that are already working and expand them more globally? What is it that really needs to be done? From a moderator's point of view, from a fairly neutral position, what I could hear was a lot of interest from the floor on mechanisms such as the Port State Measures Agreement. This is an international agreement, the first international agreement that attacks the core of the problem and looks at illegal fishing directly. It came into force last year as we got through the number of 25 countries that was needed, and since then has almost doubled. There's now 48 countries, including the European Union, as part of that mechanism. And there seems to be a lot of interest from countries taking that forward. Many of the countries were also explaining that they needed to have better information sharing, both in what might be the problem with illegal fishing and where it's happening, as well as the science-based information in order to make the appropriate assessments of the state of stock and what should be fished and how. I'll leave Milton to sort of explain the more detailed versions of that, how that rolls out on the ground. But I was quite pleased to see the way that was described. From the members of the panel that aren't present here today, Mr. Brawner from the World Trade Organization gave a clear briefing on the need to address harmful subsidies. And the President of the General Assembly actually placed a clear challenge that by December in Buenos Aires, when the World Trade Organization meets, they need to be really addressing these subsidies in order to make what is one of the short deadlines of 2020 to end harmful subsidies and deal with illegal fishing. We also heard from the Food and Agriculture Organization that are clearly partnering with many different organizations in order to address this. So I was quite pleased with the way the panel went. A little bit more detail from Milton from on the ground.
Thank you very much. I am from the Caribbean Regional Fisheries Mechanism, and for us in the Caribbean region, fisheries is very important. The oceans generally is very, very important for food, for livelihoods, etc. I was very impressed with the dialogue yesterday. I was impressed by the level of enthusiasm and the spirit in which the discussions took place. There is a lot of energy, a very high level of interest on the part of all those who intervened and participated. The dialogue, in my opinion, was frank, it was open and honest. And you sense that something new is happening. You sense a change in the level of appreciation and understanding of the urgency that we face. And the truth is, in my opinion, I think the challenges of making sustainable fisheries is perhaps the single greatest challenge facing our generation in our time, because we realize that we are at a point where something needs to change. We cannot continue along the path that we have been up to date. We need to change and to transform fisheries into making them sustainable system. I think one of the messages that I got loud and clear, and it was an urgent message, the future we want for fisheries is one where the resource is understood and treasured by all people, where the fish stocks are resilient, healthy, and productive, and where we are able to get sustainable long-term benefits, generating wealth, providing employment opportunities, providing livelihoods for our people. I think that message was very loud and clear. I think all the things that we need to do to transform fisheries from the current situation where many of our fisheries are really unsustainable, and transforming them into that sustainable and stable system capable of promoting prosperity and well-being of our people. Some of these things include rebuilding the depleted stocks. And we do have the knowledge of how these things ought to be done. We do have the legal framework within which they can be done. We have the principles that are enunciated in UNCLOS as well as in the FAO Code of Conduct and Responsible Fisheries. The challenge is to implement these in our regional and domestic fisheries to ensure that long-term sustainability. So we must rebuild the depleted stocks. We must regulate effectively all fisheries to ensure that they are sustainable. We have to improve data and information. The decisions we need to make and the measures we need to put in place must be based on science. And so we need to, in some cases, especially in the developing countries like my own countries, we have to invest more in generating the evidence that should be the basis of making decisions and monitoring the implementation of the measures we put in place. We are in an era where the climate is changing, and in the Caribbean, we have already been experiencing negative impacts of climate change. Over the past 6 years, we have been having massive blooms of sargassum seaweed, for example, which scientists tell us this is due to climate change. The warming temperatures in the waters in the Atlantic, along with increasing nutrient enrichment of the waters, is leading to the massive bloom of the sargassum seaweed, which inundate our beaches and our coastal water and disrupt fishing operations and disrupt our tourism activities. So these are serious things, and we have to get on top of them using science and technology and innovations. So we have to respond to climate change in the marine environment and countering the negative impacts on marine ecosystems. IUU fishing, again, was identified numerous times as a major problem. This has been a scourge in the fishing industry and resulted in major losses to our countries. This must stop. And we do have the means to prevent it once we have the political will. And I'm hearing the political will expressed loudly these days. So we have to finally resolve to once and for all end illegal, unreported and unregulated fishing. We have to build capacity in our region, in the small island Caribbean states. Capacity is a real problem for us. Of course, we try to overcome the limitation by strengthening our cooperation and regional approaches, and we will continue to do that. And we do need the partnership from our international development partners in building the capacity that we need and finding ways of strengthening collaboration and partnerships. Aquaculture, again, is an area. Aquaculture is the fastest growing food production sector. But this is in some parts of the world. That's not our experience in the Caribbean and in many of the small island developing states. But we understand the things that we need to do, but we do need some help and support in overcoming the impediments and challenges of promoting aquaculture development in the small island developing states. And going forward, this is an area that we must address. Subsidies, harmful subsidies, again, these things are not helping us. They're fueling illegal fishing. And so we have to discipline subsidies and eliminate those harmful subsidies. And then we heard the loud call for greater participation and inclusiveness in making decisions regarding sustainable fisheries. This, again, these are part of the governance arrangements that we need to put in place to ensure that we do have participation and inclusive approach involving local communities, non-governmental organization, community-based organization working together with international partners and international governments and regional institutions to solve these challenges. Now, most of these things are things that we have known for quite a while. The problem is that we're not doing them. But I really believe that the time has come, and I see the energy and the urgency with which these things were articulated yesterday, and I really believe we are at an inflection point now where we should be moving into a new era of promoting and achieving sustainable fisheries. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Milton. I believe both dialogues from yesterday were, I would say, not to compare with the others, all of them have been extremely well attended, but I would say that the ones from yesterday were especially, and also if you think on the number of side events related to both fisheries and also small island issues. Last week we even had a press conference just targeting on the small islands issue. So in any case, yesterday then the second dialogue was co-chaired by Estonia and Grenada on increasing economic benefits to small island developing states and least developed countries. And the dialogue was moderated by Dame Meg Taylor, who is the Secretary General of the Pacific Island Forum Secretariat. So, Meg, the floor is yours if you would just want to give us an outline of how did you perceive the dialogue yesterday.
Well, it's clear that a lot of the discussions that you had in your session was very similar to what we had in ours. But if there was something that I would take away from the discussions that we had in our dialogue, was the issue of coastal fisheries and the participation of people, and the ability of traditional communities, ability of fisher communities on how to manage, and the knowledge that is in those communities to be able to manage coastal fisheries. But raising the issue of the fact that coastal fisheries is not treated with the same interest, concern by governments, where pelagic fish gets all the attention. Now, in the Pacific, the issue is that the reason why the leaders of the Pacific Island Forum have made it a priority of theirs with coastal fisheries is because it's a food security issue and it's a health issue. If you look at the statistics of health in the Pacific, it's one of the worst in the world. And having access to good, fresh fish is really, really important. So this was also shared by fisherfolk from the Caribbean, also putting their case that organisations that have the ability to manage these coastal fisheries and to improve the stock of coastal fisheries, not just for access to markets, but really for local consumption. And if you look at fish more broadly in the Pacific, and the consumption, it's about 145 kilograms per person in the Pacific. So there's a lot of fish eaten by people in the Pacific region. It's coastal fish, but also those who can access some pelagic fish that comes by. But I just wanted to emphasize that, particularly about the indigenous knowledge in the Pacific, particularly on management of coastal fisheries, and that is that custom and tradition, where areas of reefs are set aside so people cannot harvest them for biche de mer as well, and then opened up for access to harvest fish when the time is right. Several of the other issues that was raised were particularly about the tensions that rise between tourism and fisheries, and particularly in the Pacific where they're encouraging a lot of tourism. What's going to happen when large ships come in or you have lots of visitors coming in? But I think if you look at some of the experiences like that Fiji, particularly, that has the largest number of tourists in amongst the Pacific Islands, is very well managed in terms of, and has also made commitments in terms of managing their coastal resources, looking at from ridge to reef to ensure that the environment is protected, but also the fish stock is protected for local communities. Issues particularly around fishing subsidies was raised, illegal, unregulated and unreported fishing raised, but also I think one of the important aspects was a real desire for partnership. And the President of Nauru raised partnership in the context of the private sector is the parties to the Nauru Agreement, where countries have an agreement on the vessel day scheme and how much they can fish. Or, well, they actually sell the days which are limited. I think it's per country. For countries to license ships that come in to fish in their waters. That was raised, but it was also to look further than in pelagic fish and really looking for partners who are interested in partnering in coastal management, because that is where every country is identifying where there are problems in terms of the fish stock. I'll leave it at that, I think, because I think a lot of the issues that were raised in the other dialogue was raised here. Sorry, just one last one is really on good governance. But coming back to the governance of the region as a whole, the Pacific, also in the Caribbean, but the governance at the local level, how very important that is for managing coastal stock. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Meg. I think it was from the three of you. Thank you for a good presentation, a good overview of the substance of the dialogues of yesterday. Please, if you have any questions, just introduce yourself, please.
My name is Rebecca Theodore. My question is to the Caribbean panelists. I'm also from the Caribbean island of Dominica, and I have been speaking and writing for the Caribbean to be inclusive in all of this, and I'm very happy to see him here today. We know that the Caribbean island of Grenada is one of the islands of the Caribbean which is very strongly involved in this blue economy. My question is, what about the other islands of the Caribbean? Is the UNDP going to be doing anything for funding, research, biotechnologies, new innovations to get them all involved?
I think.
I'm not sure that I can answer that question.
Can you please? Okay.
Sorry. Sorry.
No, it's fine.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Thank you very much for the question, and I'm pleased to hear that you're from Dominica. Indeed, Grenada is taking the lead, but the other countries are working closely with Grenada. We're watching Grenada, and we hope to learn the lessons that Grenada will teach us from their experience. But there are other countries that are also interested and looking at this, even though they may not be in the center of things the way Grenada is. We do hope that our international development partners will indeed work with us, other countries, to address some of these concerns, the innovations, the value additions, the development of other aspects of the blue economy, aquaculture, some of these things that I mentioned in my earlier remarks. So while the attention is focused on Grenada, there are still some activities in other countries addressing blue economic growth. And we do hope that UNDP and others will indeed assist us, because at the CARICOM level, at the CRFM level, we're developing our framework for blue growth, which comprises all our countries, not just Grenada, but they are in the forefront, and
So
we are very pleased, and we are very pleased by the leadership that Grenada has taken in moving us along the path of developing our blue economies.
So is the UNDP using Grenada as a pilot project for the Caribbean?
Grenada has been used as a pilot, yes, and we hope that the lessons would then be transferred and scaled up to other countries in the region. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please.
Thanks a lot. Matthew Lee, Intercity Press. I wanted to ask about fishing subsidies, fisheries subsidies. It's been discussed a lot around the conference, but it seems like most countries have said this will all be dealt with by the WTO at some later date. The fisheries minister of Indonesia gave kind of a defense of subsidies, saying that if you don't subsidize these fisheries, I guess he meant small fisheries, you're contributing to extremism. So I guess I just wanted to know, for example, in your regional mechanism, what is the thinking on subsidies? Which are the ones that are useful? Which are the ones that should be outlawed? Beyond just, obviously, illegal fishing, but is capacity building for countries with long-range, fishing fleets, is that viewed as abusive to smaller countries' fishing industries? And I had one other question. I think it's maybe for the representative of Pew. I think I heard you. I was rushing back over here, but I heard you refer to the EU implementing. And I wanted to know, there's a recent court ruling about fishery, an agreement that was reached with Morocco to fish off Western Sahara, which was deemed to be contrary to their struggle for sovereignty or return of sovereignty. So I wanted to know, do you view that as, is that in your bailiwick, the idea of just the location of countries? Same thing applies in Somalia, where basically you have some dispute about which government can give a fleet the right to fish. Is this viewed as illegal, or is this something that the EU can just go forward fishing off Western Sahara? Thanks a lot.
Maybe from the two regions.
From our perspective, there are clearly some subsidies that are harmful. And subsidies provided in the context of fisheries that are overexploited already. It shouldn't take place, but it is taking place now. And these really need to be disciplined. The subsidy negotiations have been difficult. And it is precisely because there are competing interests. From the perspective of small island developing states, and I think developing states generally, they have put forward the principle of special and differential treatment because of their local situation. There are situations in which subsidies can be helpful. And I think we want to maintain that carve-out, that policy space, to be able to develop our fisheries, to be able to manage our fisheries effectively, and to use subsidies where it makes sense and will not distort international trade. So that debate is going on, and I think in the end we will come up with a balance, respecting the need for some subsidies, but prohibiting those that are clearly harmful and detrimental to the health of the fish stocks and marine ecosystems and pervert international trade.
Thank you.
I'm not a fisheries expert, but my understanding of it is that the Pacific Island countries do subsidise their own fisheries. And they also partner with companies that are subsidised, foreign companies that are subsidised by their governments. But several of our governments are now coming out loudly saying they don't want fishing vessels in the pelagic fishing sector particularly that are subsidised because it has impact on IUUs. So I'll leave it at that, and you can interpret it better yourselves.
Thank you. Anthony?
Yeah, so taking on the EU piece, I wasn't talking specifically about Morocco in any case. I don't know that case specifically. But from Pew Charitable Trust's point of view, in dealing with what is a complex situation, the various levers that we can use to drive better behaviour, any coastal state should have the confidence to be able to license vessels to use their zone. And they need to use some of the simple tools that are available. They need to demand that these vessels are fully identified uniquely with IMO numbers, that the vessels comply with tracking regulations, that they're visible all the time, that they should publish the licenses openly so people can see who's licensed to fish those waters, and thus those that want to work on the dark side of the blue economy are lit up very quickly. And you mentioned Somalia in particular. I mean, Somalia recently joined a regional organisation that's referred to as Fisheye Africa. This is a set of East African nations that have come together, grown from 5 through to 8 nations, who are sharing their resources, making public their information, and working together to ensure that the large amounts of water that they cover, is over 5 million square kilometres of water, they get a more cost-effective, more clear understanding of what's happening in their zone, and they can take action. They've recently published a very clear report on how that success is coming together, with a number of penalties being issued to vessels.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I think that's all for today. We wanted always, during the whole of the week, and we'll still do it tomorrow, try to get the dialogues to you also, so we understand better what is the substantive part of the conference. Tomorrow at 12:30 we are having our closing briefing with all the leadership, the Secretary General of the conference, the two co-presidents, and the President of the General Assembly at 12:30, our normal time. Today was a little bit later than normal. Just to remind you, if you want to go to the SDG Media Zone just now at 1:30, you will have the President of the General Assembly, the Deputy Prime Minister of Sweden, and the President of Virgin, Richard Branson. So to all of you, again, happy Oceans Day, and thank you very much for being with us this afternoon. See you tomorrow.